country.
And we are now live on Facebook. So I got to tell you, Sam, this is the Facebook, and I usually am talking about Facebook and all the things they do wrong, just because they're kind of a pain to work with. And when you're trying to advertise with Facebook, it can be a pain. But all their updates, now that we know how to use them, we are able to get literally, I know exactly when I'm going live through Zoom. And so Zoom was always kind of a challenge. Now it's up and ready to go. So for those of you guys that are out there in Facebook world or virtual world, let me know in the chat box. And I don't know what wealth debate this is, but it's a lot of them now. I don't even know how many we've had. So we got a ton of them going. And with that being said, Sam, we've got people asking questions about why it's better to rent than to buy. Whenever
Sure.
you get to that, I'm sure you have other comments on your mind.
Sure.
We won't talk about the fact that the Canadian government has said that we need to give people some time to work or free or time off. Yeah, I won't even get into that. I shouldn't even start there. So,
Yeah.
Sam, you're on.
So we're still in lockdown. We'll be locked down for a couple weeks more, and I think the hope is that there'll be enough people vaccinated by that time that then when they lift it, they'll not be concerned about doing it again, and hopefully that works. So kind of disappointed with the way Canada's managed it and managed the acquisition of vaccines and getting them out. A little slow to do. Difficult when the U.S. is aggressively attacking it, and some of the states are, over that 50. They're looking for that 50%. That's the huge number the threshold that you hit, that you can really open things up without too much of a concern of managing those who do get sick. So beside the U.S., we look kind of what's the word? How do we say that politely, Pep? We look like we're falling short. How's that? So
I didn't hear what you said because I'm typing, so I don't know what you.
Okay.
What
so anyway, the news is the news. I really don't want to talk about the news as much as I like to talk about money and understanding money, specifically because my son is taking a finance class in high school, and they're talking about the Bank of Canada and a little bit about currency. But it was interesting when my son was asking me questions and stuff about what they were covering. I asked him, have you guys talked about fiat currency? And he said, no. I said, have you talked about the Brentwood Act? He said, no. I said, okay, I want you to look up these two things. They're pretty important to money, Canadian money, not only Canadian money, but all money. And I find, and I'm sure his teacher is a wonderful teacher, and I'm sure she's a scholar in her area, somewhat, if she's teaching it. And I think that there's no malice in what she's teaching. I think, though, there is a missing components that are key to understanding money and finance and how to approach it on a day-to-day basis and plan for your future. So if you've never looked up, so a couple points I would suggest if you want to understand a little bit more about money and finance. The history is it's a wonderful history, actually, in my view, and very interesting to me, why we are where we are in the way of currency. So if you have never looked up fiat currency, look it up. What fiat currency is. It's Latin. The word fiat is Latin. And also look up the Brentwood Act, which was pretty important to the world, United States included, big time, because this act was created World War II to try to repair the finances, 1944, the finances of the world at the time, to try to fix things. Europe was heavily in debt to the United States. The United States was starting to, or had been for several years, funding the Europeans against the Germans in World War II. And they were trying to find a way to restabilize the finances in the world. So they came together, created the Brentwood Act. And this is when the United States became the standard and the reserve currency. It was backed by gold, and you could take a US dollar and convert it into gold. So because of that, everybody, not everybody, but most everybody in those economies decided they were going to link their currency to the US dollar, which was in essence linking it to gold. So this continued on and failed. It failed miserably, actually, the gold standard. And this is another thing I think you want to understand. Why aren't we on the gold standard? Well, there are reasons we're not on the gold standard. And one of the biggest reasons, and I won't tell you the whole history of it. I want you to really look up and start reading about it because it's very, very important. One of the reasons is because when you try to create a gold standard, you try to fix the price of gold. And if we understand finances and the market, when you create predictability, you create corruption, and you actually hurt the economy by creating predictability. And the markets are only fair and open when they're unpredictable. Well, when you fix the price of an asset like gold, what happens is when gold went down, they knew that the governments were going to buy it up to move the price up. So when it was down here, people would buy it. And then when it got too high, they had to sell it. The governments had to sell it to get that price down to that area where they were trying to fix it, to control monetary policy around the world in the gold standard. So this was, it was arbitrage. You couldn't lose money. If you're a trader and you're trading gold, it was very difficult to lose money because you knew where the price was supposed to be because they fixed the price. So you can imagine the disaster that created. So 1971, Nixon decided, alone, basically, without the backing of Congress, that they were going to no longer convert US dollars into gold. You couldn't do this anymore. So no one could come up and say, here's my dollars, I want gold, and totally destroyed it. I believe 1973 was completely diminished. There was zero gold standard. So this was a big deal for a lot of countries around the world because they wanted, one of the reasons that they held US dollars, they always could convert them into gold. Now the US is saying, we're not going to let you convert them into gold. That becomes a problem for these countries, right? And one of the reasons that it happened, or there was a challenge is the rest of the world during this period. The United States was involved in Vietnam, and they were funding the war. It was extremely expensive, and there's some people in certain countries. France was notable, that were thinking these guys are spending more than they have. I think we want our gold. We'll take our US dollars and convert them. That would have been a serious problem for the United States. So the United States said, no, you can't convert them anymore. You can't convert gold into dollars into gold anymore. So this left everyone basically on a floating currency. In Canada, just so you know, in 1970, we became a floating currency, actually roughly a year before the United States did, for different reasons. But a floating currency is what we deal with now. This is a currency that is backed by nothing. This is why it's called fiat currency. Fiat currency is Latin, it's loosely translated, let it be so. So the government mandates that this paper is worth money. And the way they do that, two main reasons, two ways they can get you to use the money, even though nothing's backing it. No US dollar, no dollar in any modern economy is backed by anything, except, it's basically a debt note is what it is, and the promise to pay via tax collection through the governments. So how do you make people use money that's backed by nothing? You tell them they have to pay their taxes with it, and it can't be refused anywhere in the country. Basically, you can't refuse those dollars. So that gives it some substance. That being said, most people don't know that the Canadian or US dollar or the pound or the euro is backed by nothing, zero. There's nothing backing it other than the confidence of those governments able to collect and run fiscal responsible governments. So, but what's interesting to me is let's go back further and talk about bartering. Why don't we barter anymore? And I think it's important because when things go rough, people go, why don't we go back to the gold standard? And even people go, why don't we just go back to bartering? But there's a reason that we are where we are. I would argue that the fiat currency system, the floating currency system, is the best way. I don't believe in the gold standard. I don't think it works. History has told us that. I don't believe in bartering. Bartering doesn't work. There was a time for bartering, and that was when a simple economy with a small group of people. When you're talking about cities, you can't barter. You can't barter. It doesn't work. It's too complex. The economy is too complex, and it doesn't take much complexity to make barter an unworkable system. So I think it's important to learn the history of these things, to understand why we are where we are. So understand where we are, and then ask yourself, why are we where we are? Why are we on the gold standard? Why are we bartering? These are important questions. They didn't happen by accident. This was, an evolution of finance and money that brought us to where we are. And I think it's difficult to change habits that we have that don't support the growth of finance, personal finance, and expand your personal economy. It's difficult to embrace these things if you don't understand that history. I think it's very difficult because what we were taught was a very different thing than what's real and what faces challenges we face when we're talking about finance and money. So as an example, we're coming back full circle now to renting versus owning. So why is renting an option, a viable option versus ownership, home ownership? And that's a great example of something we've been taught pretty much our whole lives. Many of us, buy a house and pay it off as quickly as possible. And I'm here to tell you, and Pip will tell you the same thing. We've been talking about this for years. There's some problems there. There's a fallacy that this is the best possible move for you. First, we want to let you know that the way we define, courtesy of Robert Kiyosaki, the way we define and we embrace this idea of asset and liability, simple. Assets produce money, and liabilities take money out of your pocket. That's simple. So the first thing we do is we classify personal property that you live in, right? Property that you live in, or any property actually that doesn't make you money, as a liability. So your home for us is considered a liability. That being said, we don't believe that liabilities are bad either, right? We don't believe because you own a house, that's a bad thing. We don't think that at all. What our concern is, and this is why we're very motivated to teach people about finance and money and investing, is because if you don't know the difference, if you think your house is an asset and really it's a liability, how are you going to build wealth, right? If we don't know the difference between assets and liabilities, how are we going to legitimately build wealth? So this becomes a challenge when we're making decisions without thinking about them, or more specifically on incorrect data, stuff that we've been taught and our parents were taught and generations were taught about money. This makes it extremely difficult to build wealth. So let's just consider the idea of renting versus owning, and what value is there in renting versus owning. So first thing we want to recognize is that owning a home costs more than renting. Owning a home costs more in a regular market. Owning a home costs more than renting. Now, why does owning a home cost more than renting? Well, the reason is because the renter is just paying one flat cost, and this is a typical situation. They pay one flat cost, and all other expenses are to the owner of the property that's renting them out. Now, that being said, the renter could pay for utilities, could pay for cable access, internet access, things like this. But those bills would be paid by anybody living there who wanted those things, whether you're the owner or renting. The big ones that the owner pays that the renter doesn't is taxes. Huge amount, taxes. So taxes will continue to rise relative to the value of your home. Now, if property continues to rise in your particular area, you're going to pay more taxes relative to the cost. That's how your taxes are typically calculated in most municipalities or communities or counties. So the renter doesn't have to bear that cost, that increase in tax. Now, there is an increase in most places. I won't say most places, many places, there's fixed how much you can raise the rent. Now, raising your rent, unfortunately, will not cover the cost of taxes and other expenses, like the other big one, maintenance. So the maintenance of the property is typically the owner of the property who's renting it out. The owner has to take on the maintenance. So think about, the renter doesn't have to pay for any maintenance on the property. Something breaks, something goes wrong, roof starts to leak, furnace breaks, the owner has to pay it. And that's, again, the price of ownership. So taxes and maintenance are the price of ownership. And this is something the renter does not have to pay. And of course, the big killer is inflation. So inflation is something that the owner takes on for the capital value of his asset, right, of the house. So the house itself is losing value just because it exists and there's an expansion in the economy, which you do, because that's going to help raise the price of the house. But that being said, the inflation deteriorates any equity you have in the house. And that, again, is not taken on by the renter. So these are some major expenses. And of course, let's talk about house insurance versus tenant insurance. House insurance is more expensive than tenant insurance. Tenant insurance protects the material inside. House insurance protects the outside in a renting environment outside. and maybe limited to the inside, depending on the type of insurance policy you have, right? So if you have a mortgage, you have to have insurance. No lender is going to give you a loan on a property without some sort of insurance that you're paying to ensure that if it does burn down, they'll get their money, right? They'll still be able to recover their money. Now, if rents are if rents could cover the cost of ownership plus the cost of carrying the property, then it begs the question: if I'm paying more rent than the cost of ownership, why don't I just buy the house? If I can afford to pay to cover all these costs, why wouldn't I just own the house? Why wouldn't I just own the house? Why wouldn't I just buy the house if it costs me more? We're led to believe that renting is a waste, that renting is a losing proposition. But let's consider something. If the difference between renting and owning, say on a $500,000 house, is $500, and I'll tell you, you do the math on this, you should do the math on your own house as a renter, and if you're an owner, do it as a renter, and if you're a renter, do it as an owner. Let's say if you save $500 a month, being a renter versus an owner. Now, $500 a month over a year is $6,000. Now, if I take that money and instead of putting it into a house, because I'm renting, and I take that money and invest it, and I invest it not on the pace of property, right, home ownership, which if you've watched the other wealth debates, we've talked about this, the net return of property in the United States and Canada, you'll be lucky to get 1% after all expenses and costs. You're looking at a 1% appreciation, net appreciation over time, right? And that's really not including, it's really not including the mortgage. If you have a mortgage on that, it's less. That being said, a mortgage is the best part of property. We'll come back to that. So the property is appreciating roughly at 1% a year over time. So if we look at that, that's going to take you 72 years to double in real value. Now, remember, you might see a 6% average appreciation over time in real estate, say in the United States, Canada. But the dilemma is this: that's a gross return. That's before I pay taxes, maintenance, insurance, and inflation deteriorate that return. So I'm not getting the full 6%. So over time, I'm going to roughly get 1%. Now, the money you put in your house, that's pretty much what you're getting. 1%. You're going to net out 1%. The worst possible position you could be is a house that's paid off, because then all that money is only getting 1%. Believe it or not, it's much better for you to leverage that property and have a small amount of that property, even as an owner that's renting it out, because the 1% now becomes fractionalized. It becomes multiplied by the fraction of how much you have in it. So if you have 20% in a house and it's going 1% on the whole amount, you're getting 5 times that, because you're only putting up 20%, or roughly 5 times that, because you're only putting that up. Yep.
Go through, because I know there's people on here right now going, but Sam, the properties have been going up 12, 15, 18%. How do you come up with the 1% on average?
Sure. So the net 1%, if you look at the history of real estate in the United States and Canada, say the last 50 years, you're looking at, in the United States, it's a little bit less than Canada, but say you're looking at between 5 and 6%. We use 6% because it's a simple number. But over time, you're not going to make more than 6%. Now, if we take off 3% for inflation over time, 3% is roughly what the government wants, a 2 to 3%. But over time, it's 3%. So 6% minus 3 leaves 3%. Maintenance and insurance is going to cost you another 1% over time on your property. So you got 3% maintenance and insurance. That's going to cost us 1%. And then we got taxes. Taxes roughly 1% is going to cost you. Now, some of you live in different municipalities where the taxes are less than 1% or more than 1%. Now, if they're less than 1%, I would bet that your property values are really high relative to what you're paying in taxes. Really high, right? Over the national average. Right? That's what your price of your house is over in the national average. And if your taxes are more than 1%, it's likely that your home is below the national average. And that's why you're paying more than 1%. More than 1%. Okay. So you look at your own paperwork, you can establish this. Okay. So when we take out all those things, we're left with 1%. Now there's a reason that it's roughly 1% return. You ready? The reason it's 1% return roughly is because incomes will rise roughly 1% a year. Net, 1%. These numbers, I'm being nice. It's not 1%. Neither is your house. But I'm trying to keep the numbers simple. Your money is not, you're not making more money per year. When you start factoring everything in, you're not making more money. There's a reason that's okay. That's another topic. We talked about it on the wealth debate. Watch the old episodes of the wealth debate. We explain these things. Why you don't need to actually make more money per year. You don't need to, okay? But let's go back to your income roughly moves around 1%. So if your income can only move up 1% a year, how is it that you're going to be able to afford to pay 10% more for your properties, or 20% or 30% year over year? It's unsustainable. If your income's only going up 1%, how are you supposed to pay 10% more than last year for a property? How are you supposed to afford that? Now, there's games that the government can play, like extending the amortization, right? Insurable amortization, more importantly. Insurable amortization can be extended. This can help reduce the amount of cost it takes to take on these increasing prices, right? With the same amount of money that you're making, because you're not making more money per year. So they have to figure out a way, well, how are prices going to go up in real estate? And my income is going to stay, it's only moving at 1%. How can this move up to 10%? Oh, I know. Let's make it a 30-year mortgage or a 40-year mortgage. Let's do that. Let's extend it over 40-year mortgage. Now your income can buy this house because why? You're paying more for the house. Why? Because you're paying less per month. You're just paying less per month, right? Or I'll drop the interest rates. Dropping the interest rates does the same thing. Now I can afford to pay more expensive for a house because my interest rates have gone down. So the cost of the borrowing has gone down. So therefore more principal can be attached to the property itself. So I can pay more for the house. The thing is, you're not getting more house. It's the same house. You're just paying more for the house. That's all. It's the same house. You're just paying more. For that. And again, we talked about it on the wealth debate. It's better to buy a house when interest rates are high than when they're low. And everybody does what? Everybody wants to buy a house when interest rates are low. Why? This is a bad idea for capital appreciation. You absolutely want to buy a house when the interest rates are 8 or 12 or 22 like they were in the 70s. Early 80s, 81, 82. This is the stuff that we're doing is almost exactly the opposite of what we need to do if we want to expand wealth quickly, okay? So the 1% is extracted from the cost of ownership and inflation. That's where we get the 1%, which makes sense because your income's only going up 1%, so you can only afford to pay 1%, right? So these are the things that unfortunately the government feels the need to participate in. And I understand where they're coming from, but remember, predictability hurts the market. When you create predictability, it hurts the market. That's when corruption happens. That's when things like arbitrage happens. That's when an asset goes up in value. You need to do nothing to improve it. This is not normal. So when we go back to the question of renting versus owning, if I take the money that I save as a renter, which we're just coming up with an arbitrary number, we can look at an actual number. You should look at your own house. See what would it cost me to rent versus own. And in most areas, right, you're going to find that it costs you less to rent than own. Now, in some areas, right, there'll be a rent that's higher than the cost of ownership. This is brief moments when after a market has crashed or an economy has crashed. And what happens is if the incomes are higher than the cost of ownership, what happens? All the buyers come in like locusts, start buying up the property, prices go up, and guess what? The balance comes back again. Rents are down here, ownership is down here. If you live in San Francisco, Toronto, New York, there's no way you're getting rents that are covering the cost of ownership. Forget about it. You buy a house for $1 million, say in Vancouver or San Francisco or Toronto or New York, say $1 million. What do you think you're gonna fetch in rent? You think someone's gonna pay you 1% a month, $10,000 for $1 million house? You're crazy. You'll never get that. You'll be lucky. Hear me. You'll be lucky to get 0.5% per year. Guess what? That's going to be a negative yield property. 0.5% per year. So if you're lucky, you'll get $5,000 a month. $5,000 a month. Guess what? The cost of ownership, the deterioration value, all the things that come along with ownership, you're not making money. You convince yourself, well, it's only costing me $300-400 a month. and I'm paying off $1 million house because the guy's paying that rent is paying it off. That's fine and dandy. But you repeat that little game, 2-3 properties and market shift, you're in big trouble. You lose your primary income like your job, and you have 3 properties that negatively yield $500. Interest rates go up. How are you going to pay for your house plus these loser properties that are bleeding you? They're bleeding you. They're bleeding you. How? How are you going to do that? This is not the way to expand. Now, that being said, if you're someone who pays cash for your properties and that's the game you play, congratulations, knock yourself out. I'm not saying don't do that. If you want to do it, do it. We're not telling anybody to do what we're doing. We're just telling you what we do and why we do it. And if it's something that makes sense to you, knock yourself out, do it. If it's not, if it's something that you say, no, I'm going to be a cash person, a cash buyer, go for it. Go for it. We're just trying to give you a perspective based on what we know and understand how we invest. Yes, Pip.
Just real quickly, somebody had a question about yield. And yield, the simplest definition of yield, take your yearly rents. And so this is before any of your expenses, to just to figure out what your rental yield is. Take your yearly rents, divide those by your purchase price. So if you buy a property for $100,000 and your rent for the year is, let's say, that 1% rule, which should be $1,000 a month, that's $12,000 in rents divided by your $100,000 purchase price, or a 12% yield. That's a very good yield on a property, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
So take the same property and say you bought it for $100,000, but your rents are only $500 a month. Now you take 500 times 12 to get $6,000. 6,000 divided by 100,000 purchase price, your yield is 6%.
Yeah, and you gotta basically, and that's a gross yield. You gotta split that in half.
It's gross, but make sure we understand that's gross before
gross
any
yield.
expenses. Yeah. And so what Sam is saying, when you got this property where you bought it for $1 million and you only get, let's say you're awesome and you get $4,000 a month in rent. Well, now we've got 4 times 12, $48,000 in rent. That's a 4.8% yield. That's actually going to be negative by the time you make your mortgage payment, right, taxes, and insurance.
That's right. You're not going to make money. You're not going to make money on that property. Now, is there an opportunity in capital gains? Sure there is. Sure there is. There's no question. We have a plan for capital gains too. We don't want capital gains. We do. We just don't expect it. So I learned this rule from Pip, my mentor. If the capital appreciation, the appreciation on property goes up double digit 3 years in a row, time to sell. Time to sell. Don't hesitate. Don't think about it. Plan for it. Sell the property. It'll take you decade or decades to get that back in cash flow. Sell the property. The market will equalize. You'll lose that gain. Yep, Pip.
Had that happen in Florida, well, actually all over the United States back in 2004, 5, 6, 7, and then in 8 when it dropped. And it literally it took 10 plus years in many markets. There's a few markets, it still hasn't got back to the pre-2008 levels. And it guaranteed, if you got double digit appreciation, I'm scared after 2 years. 3 years, it's a must. Yeah. People are going to say, well, I've got people right now. I was just talking to a guy today, and it was a great question. It's his own personal residence. And he's like, you buy a house, or he wants to sell his house, move to another city. And he can get top dollar for his property right now. There's no doubt about it. But what's his concern? Wife, 2 kids, I got to move into another area where property's top dollar. So what did I say to him? Exactly what Sam's talking about. We'll rent for a year or 2.
Yes.
Property's going to come down. You're going to be better off.
That's right.
You have to downsize a little bit, maybe to rent versus ownership. Yeah, but I think you're going to see your ROI, your cash position, all those things that you like in life are going to explode for you because you sold at a high and you're not going to buy again until it corrects.
Think about it. Think about the cost of ownership. Selling a property, making hundreds of thousands of dollars in profit and going and rent. Are you all over it? Go rent for 5 years. Go rent for 5, 6 years, or stay renting. Stay renting. For me, I don't see a huge benefit for home ownership financially. That doesn't mean don't own a house. I own a house. I own a house. And I'm telling you, renting financially is better than home ownership. So why do I own a house? It's because I love my wife. And my wife wants to own a house. She wants a home ownership. Now, it took me a long time to convince her that there's an opportunity renting versus owner. So we plan when my son is done university and school, we're going to move. Or if he moves out before then, we're going to move. We're going to sell our house and rent. She's on board now. But for several years, she wanted home ownership. Now, if I'm not making wealth or creating wealth or expanding my finances for my wife and my son, who am I doing it for? So this isn't about I'm going to abandon everyone and put money ahead of them. No, my wife's happiness is the number one most important thing in my life. Second to my son. My wife's number one. So she says she wants ownership. That makes her happy. I'm going to make that happen. Now, financially, is it better to rent? Without question. We're not telling you to abandon, everything and just, pursue wealth or money. We're just saying, look, if you make these decisions, base them on fact, base them on math, simple math, base them on reason. So if you're staying in your own house and you want to stay in your house, it's fine. There's no problem. But calling it an asset is just outright, in our view, wrong. It's not an asset. It's a liability. And it will be, in fact, you ready? The longer you hold the house, the less likely you're going to make money in appreciation. How's that sound? That sound good? That sound good to you? Because that's the truth. That's the truth. We're not talking about 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. We're talking about a lifetime. When you look at a lifetime, that's how you measure these things. It's not normal for a house to go up in value if nobody has done anything to improve it. What asset are you gonna make sense to you that you do nothing to it and it goes up in value? That's why the stock market, I trade, I'm telling you, trade currency, I'm telling you, the stock market is nothing but a big fat capital gains chase. That's all it is. It's capital gains. There's no yields in the market anymore. That's gone. It's capital gains. It's capital. In my view, you have a better chance in Vegas. If you're going in the stock market uneducated, you have a better chance in Vegas of making money. The odds are better than in the stock market. These things, being able to extract money from the stock market and real estate effectively, consistently, this is a skill. This is a talent. This is not something that you just roll the dice. This is not how we do it. There's a system, and there's a method, and there's a history based on reason and fact of the history of finance and money. That's what we're talking about. So if we take that $6,000 that we're saving, or whatever it is that you're saving per year, and we invest it, say at 10%, and we take the next 25 years, you will outpace the capital gains that you make on that property in your investment. You will outpace it. In fact, the longer you hold that position, the longer you rent and continue to invest that way, you will produce a much higher yield than the capital gains you would get on the property without the risk of home ownership, without the market going down. It's easy to pick dates on a chart. Well, I'd sell my house here before it went down. Okay. I would sell my stock here before it went down. Okay. Really? Yeah. You know the tops and bottoms. Good luck with that game. If you're retiring and the market has crashed, you're in big trouble. If that was what you were basing your retirement. If your house was your biggest asset, liability, and the market crashes when you're going into retirement, good luck. Good luck. You're going to have a serious problem. You can't know what's going to happen in the economy. You can't. But what you can do is base your finance on the concept of real wealth takes real time. And there's a system you can apply over time and build and expand your wealth. You will need to, based on our system and approach to investing, you will need to get comfortable with debt. Absolutely. You will embrace debt. You will be responsible with it, and you will use it as a tool to exponentially expand your wealth. Absolutely. So what we're saying is, do the math yourself. Don't believe a word we're saying to you just based on what we're saying. Apply it. Use it. Use it. Ask your own personal experience. right? What's my personal experience with this? Now test that personal experience. Your method, your way if you want. But there's some things that I would tell you to do. How about we pull out a pencil and a piece of paper and start doing some simple addition and multiplication, some division, some minusing, and look at your current situation and ask yourself, how much would I save if I was renting? There's places where you pay taxes. The taxes you pay, you could rent. You can rent a decent place just with the taxes you pay. Forget about maintenance. Forget about insurance. Forget about inflation. You never get those dollars back, by the way. Those tax dollars aren't coming back. That doesn't come. That percentage, that the increase that you see, you have to include those cost of ownership. Cost of ownership. Absolutely. It's not easy to build wealth quickly. It's not. It takes effort, it takes education, it takes application, it takes somewhat of a discipline. If you're willing to do these things, then consider all things. If you really want to understand money and get your arms around it, be a student of it. Ask yourself some basic questions. Let's not just accept, oh, my house is the best investment I can have. Prove it. Prove it. Put pen to paper, or pencil to paper, and start doing the math. There's a different story out there, I promise you. It's a story that you can only really appreciate through the study of history of finance and money and the application. When you apply it, the world changes. And then you realize, number one rule, all wealth is created. Whoa. Wake up in the morning and realize you can create wealth from nothing. Wow. Game over. Game over. There's nothing you can't have in this world. Nothing. Or your family.
For my Robert Kiyosaki fans out there, for those of you guys that have read his stuff, I mean, I got taught by him in 2007, and he always uses the concept, and it's similar to what Sam just said. Money is an idea. Money's not a tangible, it's an idea. It's created out of thin air. And when you start to do that, you can literally write your own ticket, whatever you want to call it, write your own checks, I guess is a better way to say it. I started looking at this in a different way after I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. There's no doubt about it. That was not that I didn't look at money I had a different upbringing than Sam did. Parents, very entrepreneurial. My dad hawked everything. When I say hawked, wrote his name on the line. He understood debt. So I don't know how many times he did it. I'm going to talk from my lifetime, from 1967. So that's when I started on this earth. Sam's probably a little further back than me, but it's all good. And I look back and I'm blessed because my dad, whether he understood it or not, he used it to catapult himself way further forward as a form of leverage. In 1967, they went from my dad had multiple different grocery stores. And I say multiple, each time he would either close one down and do another one, move locations, whatever, always growing is what he was doing. His first grocery store was 2 aisles. Now, I know Rob 67 was a great year. December 67, an even better time, right, Rob? And so Rob's like a week or so older than me, I think, something like that. I can't remember his birthday. Anyway, so my dad's first grocery store was 2 aisles. When I say 2 aisles, there was one gondola thing in the middle, whatever you call it, where the shelving was, and then one side on each. That's all there was. This is 1948, 1950, that time frame. They sold that property, they sold that store, moved to Nebraska City, got another store. It was 2 aisles again. Then they changed locations. And each time, you know what he did? He went down to the bank and he did what? He signed a loan each time. In 50, he moved he didn't have any kids. So him and my mom did that. In 57, he did it again when he had 3 kids. And in 67, he did it again when he had 6 kids. So he had all this debt. Every time he would go into more and more debt. But it was for what? It was to leverage for more growth. And then in 1980, he realized he needed to add on to his grocery store. So when I was 12 years old, he did it again. He did it again. Now, this is really gets where the story gets interesting, because when in 1980, my dad would have been 59 when he did it. So he wasn't a young man. Then in 1994, y'all can do the math with me there, he was in his early 70s. And you know what he said? He said, I'm going to do it again. This last time he did it for the family. He always did it for him, his entire family. But he said, I'm going to put, and he literally hawked everything. When I say hawked, he put his name on the line, did personal guarantee. Now, he might have done it differently had he known better, but he did a personal guarantee. And literally at the age of 73, could have lost everything he had, his house, his cars. But he said, you know what? I'm going to bet on who? Himself. Because there's nothing that's going to go down. Anything else in this world can go down in value, guaranteed. The only thing that's never going to go down in value is you, if you keep putting stuff into your mind with the right mindset and with the right people around you. It's a pretty simple concept. You're the only can't miss thing in this world, as long as you keep improving. Sorry, Sam, I had to go off on a tangent.
Yeah, no, that's really what it is. Comes down to betting on yourself, and to increase the odds of success, you need to invest in yourself. You need to invest in your understanding and your application of money and finance. And these are excellent questions. Why do I own versus rent? So just do the math. Do the math. See what you're saving. And there'll be very few, if any of you, that don't save money. There are brief moments when that happens, but that's in a devastated economy. Where the rent's higher than the price of the house. It's just, there was a time very recently where oil had a negative price. These things do happen in a freak, moments in the market, but that didn't last. And obviously oil's almost completely recovered.
You're talking on the oil, you're talking about last April or May, right?
Yeah. It was negative. It cost you money. It was negative dollars. People would pay you to take the oil away from them. That's what it was saying. I'll pay you, just take this from me. It didn't last long, obviously. It was costing money to store it. There was nowhere to put it. There was nobody taking it. So there was a cost of storing it. That's why the market was reacting. Like, what are we going to do with this oil? It's going to cost us money to store it. It's better off just to get rid of it, pay someone to take it so they store it. It was crazy.
That is a hard thought to even wrap your head around.
Yeah. So it didn't last long. It recovered almost, instantaneously recovered, and oil is almost completely recovered. It has really pre-crash. It's not over $100 or anything like that, but it's if you watch the pumps, you're seeing the oil, gas prices go up. I don't completely understand, other than speculation, right? It's all about speculation. They think that when COVID lifts and the economies are wide open again, which even that concept is a little bit of a stretch, completely wide open. But let's say completely wide open, that all of a sudden the economy is going to roar. And I will say this, it will roar, but not in the same places. It shifted. We're kind of lucky, not because of COVID itself, but this period has allowed for economic transition to other areas and a different type of economy, while there was support from the governments, which is very, usually you don't get that kind of transitional support where you were working in an office, now you were working at home, where certain markets like Zoom, interaction, the internet, marketing, selling your products on the internet, delivery service, all these things, so much has shifted there. So typically we don't get a lot of opportunity or foresight to see that. So this time's allowed us to do that. That's, I guess, one benefit, some silver lining in it, that we've had the opportunity as a population to transition into that by force, but to at least somewhat participate and spectate with a minimal impact to us not fully engaged in this new economy. So we'll have to see what happens. So that being said, a couple of things I would like you to consider till we see you next time. Look up the Brentwood Act, look up Fiat Currency, and a book or video. You can watch it on videos. It's an excellent series called The Ascent of Money. BBC did a 6-part series, I think, on YouTube. You can watch it for free. You can read the book, which I suggest doing both. The book is amazing. That's how I was introduced to it. It's The Ascent of Money.
How do you spell ascent? I'm trying to put that in the chat. I don't know how to spell ascent.
Well, I'm not gonna screw it up. I'll tell you that. Here, look at this.
Yeah, tell me. I'm trying to type it. I can't type and go on my phone at the same time. But
I don't want to.
I just want to put it in there, and I don't know how to put ASCENT as my guess, but I don't know the ascent.
How'd you spell it?
ASCENT.
That's right. The ascent of money. Yep.
Okay. I just want to make sure I didn't put it wrong because somebody would definitely call me.
I'll give you. You can watch. Like I said, you can watch it on. You can watch it on YouTube. I'm trying to get you the author. Niall Ferguson.
Whoa.
Niall. I think it's Niall.
Ferguson. Okay. I thought that was
Ferguson.
His last name, Ferguson. Okay.
Yeah, Ferguson. Excellent book. And really, not only does it cover the history of many things like insurance, monetary policy, just an excellent book, but it also delves into, because it was post 2008, when he talks about what happened in 2008, the meltdown and stuff like that. It's an excellent book. One of the best books I've ever read about finance. So wonderful book. Watch the videos. You'll love it. I think you'll love it. But great source. There's some other books I'll talk about on some of our other shows. But right now I think that's enough for you. So Fiat Currency, the Brentwood Act, and check out the Neil Ferguson. Sorry. What is it?
Niall Ferguson.
Niall Ferguson's book, The Ascent of Money. Yeah.
One thing I do want to say, and I even made a comment in here, and it's, you got to make sure that your financial decisions don't kill you emotionally.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say it better than that, because, you know, a couple of people were talking about selling their house now at a high market and renting. If emotionally that's going to put stress on your family, then it's what did Sam say? The most important thing was his wife and his child.
Happiness.
Obviously, it's, you know, I go back and look at what my dad did. Was it the best thing? I don't know. At the time, it was very stressful, and I didn't notice it as much. I've talked about this before. We owned a grocery store right across the street from the grocery store is where we lived, and I was 12 years old, so it was 1980, 81, right in that area. And there's some financial. My dad had just signed a big note at the bank, so he had hawked everything, as I keep saying. And then you're welcome, Charles. Charles said I requested the question, and then he asked. So my dad had hawked a bunch of stuff, and my mom was on it too. She signed with everything that he did. They were married for 55 years before he passed away. So they were a team, a couple, whatever you want to call it. And I give so much, what's the word I want to use? And I'll probably get emotional, just stock in everything they did, because they taught me a ton. And it's cool for me to see that. Because, you know, Sam growing up, and most people grow up more like Sam than like me. And I'm not bragging. I'm just saying it's just the way it was.
Yeah.
Less business owners in the world than there are employees. That's just a true statistic. Anyway, so in 81, I remember we were right across the street from our grocery store. That's where we lived. So I'd have been 13 years old, 7th or 8th grade, whatever that is. I go over to the store. My mom tells us, my mom would always ask us in the evening, and my mom would use great analogies like, well, you like to exercise. Why don't you run over to the store and get me this? Yeah, that's why I like to exercise. You know, I like to play basketball and football. It's not running over to the grocery store, but, you know, moms have a great way of getting you to do stuff. And so anyway, so she sent me over to the store to get like 5 items. So she gives me a list, 5 items. It's like 8:00 at night. I go over to the grocery store. When you're in the grocery store line, now remind you, we own the grocery store. So we've already paid for all the stuff in the store at wholesale. My dad would not let us take anything out of the grocery store unless we paid for it. It was a great lesson. Talk about a huge lesson. Because technically we already bought it. We could have just taken it off the shelf, but no, we always went through the check stand. We paid full retail. We didn't, you know, whatever it was. So here's the point I want to make. I'm standing at the check stand. Peter. And what was happening, Peter's making comments on here. I'm standing at the check stand. You all know at the check stand, what do they have there? They have the magazines. They have all the magazines and the candy and all that kind of stuff. Well, I'm 7th or 8th grade. I love pro football. It was right before the pro football season, and TV Guide has the fall football special on the stand there. So for 35 cents, I pull it off the thing and I put it on the counter. And this is where discipline is so important. And this is a great story, by the way. takes the TV guide. I put it on the counter. I go pay for the groceries, go back over to our house. My dad is standing in the kitchen when my mom starts to unload the groceries. There's only like 5 or 6 items. There's TV guide in here. My mom's name was Dorothy. My dad called her Dort. He goes, Dort, did you tell Pip to get this TV guide? She said, no. He goes, why'd you get TV guide? And I said, because it's got the fall sports section on it. He says, this is 35 cents that we don't have right now. Take it back to the store, get my money back. I said, well, I'll give you the 35 cents. He says, that's not the point. Take it back to the store, get our 35 cents back. So what did I do? Tail between my legs, probably saying bad words underneath my breath because I was 12 or 13. I didn't know whatever the bad words would have been. I was so ticked off, but to this day, I'm 53 years old. So whatever that is, 40 years later, I still remember it like it was yesterday. I still get the same pit in my stomach because that was the first time in my life I realized that we couldn't just get what we wanted. It's not that we brought up with tons of stuff. We just didn't know what we did or did not have. We just didn't even know it. And then that was the first time I was told we don't have enough for this, and it was 35 cents. Now, if I'd have bought something that was 35 bucks or higher, makes perfect sense. But 35 cents, I realized the stress my dad was under, but he realized that he'd gone into debt and he was going to do everything he possibly could to make sure that we were going to be successful. It's a lot of pressure. So I'm going to go back to the same thing I said, and then we'll call it a night on the wealth debate, is if the pressure of debt, if the pressure or the emotional issue of doing some of the stuff that Sam and I are talking about, don't do it. We're not twisting anybody's arm. We're just saying there is definitely some better ways out there. It requires discipline. It requires knowledge. It requires support and a network of people to help you with it, because 95% of the people are going to tell you you're crazy. And that's not unusual. So with that being said, share this with anybody. It's on YouTube. I'm sure that's on a YouTube channel somewhere. I don't know. And my voice is just about gone, so I can't talk much more today. But next Wednesday, we've got the next wealth debate. Monday, if you're interested, and if you have a question on it, you can send me a personal message. We're going to be doing a mastermind session. It's 90 minutes with 2 of our business partners, Ron and Gene. It's Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern. I know some of you guys are already signed up for that. So if you have a question about that, it's free. It's 90 minutes. You might learn some stuff. We're going to talk a lot about masterminding and having the right people surrounding you in a support group. So with that being a great question for tonight, and we wanted to make sure we addressed it, and so we spent the whole time on it. I'm glad we didn't have a guest tonight because we wouldn't have got around to it.
Yeah, right. True
We'll have
story.
some guests next week. So we'll see you guys next time or Monday on our Monday night session with, if you have questions on it, send me a private message. Talk to you guys soon on the next wealth debate or sooner.
Learn and earn. We'll see you next time.